Have you ever heard of an island where no one ever returned alive? An island shrouded in fog, untouched by time, erased from every map, yet it existed. Sailors whispered about it, kings tried to claim it, explorers vanished trying to find it. But what if I told you that this island wasn't just real, it still might be out there? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the story you're about to hear is one that most historians refuse to talk about, a story buried beneath centuries of silence and blood. The sea was calm that night, silent except for the creak of wood and the whisper of waves against the hull. Captain Edward Holloway stood at the bow of his ship, the Providence, staring into the endless black horizon. The stars above were bright, scattered like diamonds across an ocean of darkness. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The compass had been acting strange since morning, its needle spinning without direction, refusing to settle. His men called it a bad omen. He called it nonsense. But deep down, he felt it too. Something was out there. Watching. It was the summer of 1742, and the Providence had set sail from Ireland on a routine voyage to chart new lands. The crew of 40 men were seasoned explorers, loud, superstitious, and brave. They laughed as they worked, sang shanties under the moon, and drank cheap rum to chase away the salt air. The first 2 weeks were peaceful. Clear skies, steady winds, and smooth sailing. Until the fog came. It rolled in without warning, thick and heavy, like a living thing. Within minutes, the horizon vanished. The sun dimmed to a dull orange blur. Even the sound of the sea seemed to fade, leaving behind an eerie stillness. And then someone shouted from the crow's nest, "Land ahead!" Through the gray mist, a dark silhouette emerged. At first, they thought it was a mirage, a shadow of clouds, or a trick of the fog. But as they drew closer, its shape grew sharper. It was an island. Small, jagged, and completely uncharted. Holloway's heart pounded. No map showed an island here. No explorer had ever mentioned one. Yet it stood there, silent and massive, as if it had been waiting for them. The men cheered, their excitement cutting through the tension. But Holloway felt dread crawling up his spine. The compass needle was still spinning. The gulls that usually followed their ship had vanished. Even the waves seemed to grow sluggish, as if the ocean itself didn't want them to approach. Still, curiosity won over fear. He gave the order to drop anchor. When dawn broke, the island revealed itself in full. A black mass of forest and cliffs surrounded by sharp rocks like the teeth of some giant beast. No birds, no movement, no life. The mist clung to it like a veil. The men named it Blackthorn Isle, a name as ominous as the land itself. A small crew of 6 men, led by the first mate, Samuel Reed, was sent to investigate. They rowed ashore, their oars slicing through the still water. Holloway watched until they disappeared into the fog. They carried rifles, lanterns, and a flag bearing the mark of the British Empire. Their mission was simple: explore the coast, take notes, and return before nightfall. But night came, and they didn't return. Holloway waited. He lit signal flares. He shouted until his voice broke. The fog swallowed every sound. On the second day, he could no longer stand the silence. He gathered 10 men and set off for the island himself. The closer they got, the colder the air became. The fog thickened until they could barely see their own hands. When they finally reached the shore, Holloway's boots sank into sand that looked almost black. The air smelled strange, metallic, like blood and smoke. The forest loomed ahead, dense and twisted. The landing camp was easy to find, but something was horribly wrong. The rifles were there, the lanterns too, but no sign of Samuel, Reed, or his men. Then they noticed the footprints. Dozens of them. Some were human, others far too large, too deformed, to belong to any animal Holloway had ever seen. The prints led into the forest, and next to one of the trees, someone had carved a symbol into the bark, a crude circle, with an eye in the center. Below it, written in what looked like blood, were 2 words: "It watches." The men begged to leave, but Holloway's pride refused to turn back. He was a captain of the crown. He would not return empty. Lantern in one hand and pistol in the other, he led his men into the forest. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The trees seemed to bend unnaturally, their branches curling like claws. The ground was soft and damp, and the silence pressed against their ears. Even their own breathing sounded wrong. Too loud, too shallow. They found more symbols burned into tree trunks. Hundreds of them. Circles, eyes, runes, none of them could understand. It was as if someone or something had marked the entire island. Then came the stench. A sweet, rotting smell that clung to their throats. One of the men gagged. Another whispered a prayer. They followed the trail until the trees opened into a small clearing, and that's when they saw them, the missing men. Samuel Reed sat upright against a tree, his eyes wide open, staring into nothing. His face was pale, frozen in terror. Around him, the other 5 lay in strange positions, as though they had fallen midst. There were no wounds, no blood, no sign of struggle. Just lifeless bodies with open mouths filled with sand. Holloway knelt beside Reed and felt for a pulse. None. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The ice. Every single man's eyes had been removed. In their place, someone had pressed small white seashells. The men broke. One screamed, another dropped his lantern. setting the grass ablaze. Flames shot up in seconds, but then, without explanation, the fire simply died. No smoke, no embers, just darkness again. The air was heavy, as if the island had swallowed the light itself. Holloway gave the order to retreat, but as they turned to leave, they realized the path they had taken was gone. The forest had changed. The trees were closer now, twisting together to form a wall of branches. Every direction looked the same. Panic spread. The men shouted, fired their guns, even hacked at the trees. But it was useless. The island had them. Hours passed. Then days. Time blurred. The sun didn't rise, or maybe it did, hidden behind the endless fog. They were trapped in a world without direction. One by one, the men vanished. Holloway would turn his head for a moment, and someone would be gone. Oh, scream. No trace, no footprints. Just gone. When only Holloway remained. He stumbled upon something massive deep in the forest, a stone structure, half buried in the ground. Its walls were covered in moss and strange carvings that glowed faintly when he touched them. Inside was a single stone altar surrounded by piles of skulls, all facing inward. On the altar was a map, etched into the rock. It showed the world as it might have looked centuries ago. But there, in the middle of the Atlantic, was the island Blackthorn, marked with the same eye symbol. Holloway's hand trembled as he traced the carving. The air vibrated. From somewhere deep within the stone, he heard whispers. At first faint, then clearer. They spoke in a language he didn't know, chanting, calling his name. He dropped the lantern and ran, the voices chasing him through the darkness. When he reached the shore again, his ship was gone. Only empty water remained. For what felt like weeks, he wandered the coast. He drank rainwater, ate roots, and slept in the sand. At night, he saw lights flickering deep in the trees. Shadows moved between them. Sometimes he heard laughter, low, human, but not quite. And every time he tried to leave, his feet carried him back to the same place, as if the island itself controlled his will. One morning, he woke to the sound of waves crashing harder than usual. A small wooden boat had washed ashore, its surface covered in strange symbols. Inside was a sealed parchment bearing the mark of the British Empire, but the date stamped on it was 1834. Almost a century ahead. He didn't think. He climbed in, pushed off, and let the current take him. As the fog began to fade, the water grew clearer, calmer. The horizon reappeared, blue and endless. For the first time, he smiled. But just as the light touched his face, everything went black. Months later, a fishing vessel found the Providence adrift off the coast of Cornwall. The ship was nearly destroyed, its sails torn, its deck covered in salt. Inside, there was only one man left alive. When they pulled him from the wreck, they realized it was Captain Edward Holloway. But something was wrong. He looked old, decades older than his records claimed. His hair was white, his skin paper thin, and his eyes were gone. Seashells had been pressed where his eyes should have been. When they asked his name, he whispered a single word before collapsing. Blackthorn. He died moments later. The official report listed it as an unexplained maritime tragedy. But among sailors, the story spread like wildfire. They spoke of an island that called two men, an island where time itself broke, and where no one who landed ever truly returned. And though maps changed and centuries passed, fishermen still claimed to see strange fogs rising from the Atlantic, fogs that whispered, calling out names no one should know, because some islands don't want to be found, and Blackthorn was one of them. The year was 1907. Almost 2 centuries had passed since the Providence and its doomed crew vanished into fog and silence. For most, the story of Captain Edward Holloway and Blackthorn Isle had faded into sailors' folklore. Another ghost tale, whispered in the taverns of coastal towns. But for one man, it was an obsession. His name was Dr. Alistair Crowe, a historian from Cambridge with a fascination for maritime mysteries. He had spent years studying ship logs, old letters, and sea charts long forgotten in the archives of the British Museum. And one night, while sifting through a box of naval records labeled unconfirmed sightings, he found it a faded entry written in Holloway's own hand. The ink was old, brown from age, and nearly unreadable. But one line stood out. The island watches. Time bends. Do not follow. Crowe didn't believe in curses or ghosts. He believed in science, in logic, in uncovering the truth behind myths. So when he stumbled across the coordinates recorded in Holloway's final log, he felt something stir inside him. Curiosity, yes, but also something deeper. A hunger to find what no one else dared to seek. He spent months preparing for his expedition. He gathered a crew of 6 sailors, scholars, and a photographer named Eleanor Price, who had been documenting strange ruins across Europe. She was fearless, sharp-witted, and perhaps the only one who understood Crowe's quiet obsession. They set sail from Portsmouth in late August aboard the Halcyon, a steel-hulled ship built to survive the wild Atlantic. At first, everything went as planned. The ocean was calm, the wind steady. The crew laughed when Crowe told them the story of Captain Holloway, how he had found an island no map recorded, how his men had vanished, and how he'd returned blind with shells pressed into his eyes. They called it nonsense, the ramblings of a man driven mad by isolation. But Eleanor noticed something strange in Crowe's expression as he spoke. Not fear, but anticipation. On the fourth night, the sea changed. The waves turned cold, the air heavier. A low humming sound began to vibrate through the ship's hull, faint but constant, like the sea itself was singing. The crew dismissed it as an echo from the wind. But Crow knew the coordinates, and they were close. By dawn, fog surrounded them, thick and endless. The compass began to spin. The ship's engine groaned as if straining against something unseen. Eleanor climbed to the deck and pointed ahead. Through the mist, a dark outline appeared. Jagged cliffs, tall trees, and black sand. It was there, Blackthorn Isle. The men grew quiet. Even the waves seemed to die down as they approached. The island rose from the fog like a memory that should have stayed forgotten. They dropped anchor in shallow water. Crow could barely contain his excitement. "No one's seen this place in 200 years, he whispered. "We are rewriting history today." Eleanor raised her camera and took the first photograph. The sound of the shutter echoed sharply, unnaturally loud in the still air. The crew built a small camp along the shore. The sand was strange, dark gray, fine as ash, and cold to the touch. The trees nearby were twisted, their bark streaked with black sap, and everywhere they looked, they saw symbols carved into stone and wood, circles with eyes, spirals, runes that seemed to move when stared at too long. One sailor, Thomas, laughed it off. "Old sailor's nonsense," he said, kicking at one of the carvings. But that night, Thomas screamed. They found him hours later, standing knee-deep in the surf, eyes wide, muttering something no one understood. When they dragged him back to camp, he trembled like a child. His hands were covered in cuts, and his eyes, they were bleeding. He kept repeating one phrase over and over. It spoke my name. Crow didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire, staring into the fog, listening to the wind. Somewhere out there, something moved. Not footsteps, not waves. Something else. Something that breathed. The next morning, they pressed deeper inland. Eleanor insisted on documenting everything. Her photographs captured the ruins of ancient stone structures buried under moss, pillars, carved with eyes and skeletal figures. One wall bore a massive circular carving, identical to the one Holloway had described centuries earlier. Beneath it, a line of text in a language no one could read. As the group explored, they found remains, not of Holloway's crew, but bones far older. Thousands of them, scattered through the soil like forgotten relics. Some were human, others weren't. By noon, a storm rolled in. The sky turned black, and the fog grew thicker. The crew hurried back toward the shore, but when they arrived, the camp was gone. The tents, the supplies, even the ship anchored offshore, vanished. The sea was empty. Eleanor gasped. "It's gone," she whispered. "It's all gone." Crow's heart pounded. He turned to look behind them, and froze. The forest had changed. The path they had just walked was gone. The trees had moved, closing in, twisting like serpents. The air vibrated with a low hum, the same sound that had echoed through the ship's hull. Then came the whispers, faint at first, then louder, all around them. Dozens of voices, speaking in rhythm, some in English, others in a tongue that made the skin crawl. Eleanor dropped her camera. The glass shattered. Crow shouted for the men to move, but one by one they froze, staring into the mist. Their eyes widened. Their mouths opened, whispering the same chant as the unseen voices. The sound grew until it became unbearable, a wave of noise pressing against their skulls. Crow grabbed Eleanor's hand and ran. The forest shifted again, branches closing around them like claws. He tripped over something, a skeleton half buried in the dirt, wearing a tattered naval coat. In its bony hand was a rusted compass, the same kind used in the 1700s, Holloway's time. He picked it up. The needle was spinning wildly, but as he stared at it, it stopped, pointing not north, but deeper into the forest. They followed it. It led them to a clearing where a massive stone altar stood, cracked but still intact. It looked almost identical to the one from Holloway's account. On its surface was a map, but this one was different. It wasn't carved, it was pulsing, as if alive, glowing faintly beneath the moss. Crow touched it. In an instant, the world changed. The air vanished. The fog swallowed everything. He saw visions, sailors screaming, ships burning, eyes watching from beneath the water. A voice echoed in his mind, deep and ancient. "You followed," Eleanor screamed beside him. He turned, her face pale, her eyes wide, and then she was gone. The altar cracked open, revealing a pit beneath, swirling with black water. Something moved inside it, something vast. Crow stumbled backward, tripping over roots, gasping for breath. The sky above was gone. Only endless gray remained. He ran until his legs gave out. When he woke, he was on the shore again. The storm had passed. The island was quiet. The Halcyon was anchored offshore, exactly where it had been before. The camp was untouched, as though nothing had happened. He climbed aboard the ship, calling for his crew. No answer. He searched every cabin, every corner. Empty. Only Eleanor's camera remained on the deck. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the forest clearing the altar, the stones, the fog, and standing in the middle was Dr. Alistair Crow himself. But his eyes were gone. When the Halcyon drifted into Portsmouth Harbor weeks later, it carried no living soul. Only Crow's journal, sealed in a metal box, floating in the captain's quarters. The last entry read, The island is not a place. It's a hunger, and it remembers every name. The ocean was dark and endless, as the research vessel, the Asterion, pushed through the fog. The air was unnaturally still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Professor Amelia Trent stood on the deck, her gloved hands gripping the railing as the faint outline of something rose ahead of them. Land. It wasn't supposed to exist. Every map, every satellite image, said there was nothing here. Yet there it was. Dark cliffs stretching from the mist, like the bones of some ancient beast. Her heart pounded. After decades of myth and disappearance, after stories that blurred the line between madness and legend, she had found Blackthorn Isle. The crew watched in silence. Captain Hughes, a man who'd seen every corner of the North Atlantic, looked uneasy. "This isn't right," he muttered. "Islands don't just appear, Professor." Amelia didn't respond. She couldn't. Every instinct told her to turn back. But the pull of discovery of uncovering what happened to her Gretton, Eleanor Price, and the lost Crow expedition was stronger. They lowered a small boat and rowed toward the shore. The waves were strangely calm, barely moving. When the keel scraped against black sand, Amelia felt a sudden vibration beneath her boots. Not movement, but a pulse, faint and rhythmic, like a heartbeat coming from under the earth. She knelt and touched the ground. It was warm. The beach was silent except for the distant cry of gulls that never seemed to get closer. They set up camp just beyond the tree line, near what looked like the remains of a stone arch. The carvings on it were deep and jagged spirals, eyes, and symbols that made no sense. Dr. Isaac Renner, her linguist and runologist, examined them with growing unease. "These aren't Celtic or Norse," he murmured. "They're older, maybe pre-human." Maya Lorne, the tech specialist, launched her drone to map the area, but within minutes, the feed turned to static. The drone's lights blinked once and vanished into the fog. "Signal interference," she said, though her voice trembled. "Or something's jamming it." Amelia decided they would proceed on foot the next morning. That night, the fog grew thicker, pressing against their tents like a living thing. Around 2 a.m., something woke her. A sound, low and distant, almost melodic. She unzipped her tent and stepped out into the cold air. The sea was glowing faintly, like liquid silver. She saw movement on the shore, a figure, walking slowly into the waves. "Captain Hughes," she called out. The man didn't turn. His posture was stiff, his steps mechanical. She ran after him, her flashlight cutting through the mist. But when the beam reached the water, he was gone. Only his boots remained on the sand, neatly placed side by side. By dawn, the crew was panicked. Hughes was gone, the radios were dead, and the compass needles spun endlessly. Amelia tried to remain calm, focusing on the reason they came. The coordinates carved into Eleanor's old photographs. Those numbers led here, and somewhere on this island lay the truth. She gathered her team and started inland. The forest was dense and wrong. Trees grew in spirals, their branches bending toward each other like clasped hands. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Even the sound of their own footsteps seemed swallowed. Renner stopped suddenly. "Do you feel that?" he asked. The ground beneath them vibrated again, faintly. He knelt and brushed away the soil. Beneath the moss lay stone carved, patterned, a path. They followed it to a clearing where a massive altar stood, half buried and covered in vines. Amelia froze. She had seen it before in the photographs. The same symbols, the same cracks, the same faint bloodstains. Her great haunt had stood right here nearly a century ago. She moved closer and brushed away the moss on one of the symbols. Beneath it, freshly carved, were letters. Her name, Amelia Trent. Her hands began to shake. "This can't be." Renner stumbled back, his face pale. "Someone's been here," he whispered. Recently, the wind picked up, carrying with it a low, whispering sound that seemed to come from the stones themselves. It wasn't language, not exactly, but it had rhythm, almost like chanting. Maya pulled out her recorder and hit play. When the audio came through, the whispers were clearer. Words, layered over each other, ancient and terrified. Renner's eyes widened as he translated. "It says, the Watchers remember. The door must stay open." A sudden crack echoed through the forest, a tree falling, or something heavier, moving just beyond the fog. The sound grew closer, heavy footsteps that didn't belong to any animal. They turned toward the altar, but what emerged from the mist made every muscle in Amelia's body freeze. Figures, dozens of them, translucent, flickering, wrapped in the tatters of old naval coats. Their eyes glowed faintly, hollow and endless. One stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, his face barely visible beneath the flicker of spectral light. Amelia recognized the outline immediately. The same man from the final photograph. Dr. Alistair Crow. Her breath caught. "Dr. Crow." The figure tilted its head, voice low and distorted. "You shouldn't have come." Renner stepped forward, trembling. "What is this place?" Crow's eyes shifted, dim and distant. "Not a place. A threshold. Once opened, it must feed." The forest seemed to pulse around them. The fog thickened, curling around their legs like smoke. The air grew colder. Amelia backed away, clutching Eleanor's camera to her chest. Feed, she whispered. The voice came from everywhere at once. From the ghosts, from the earth, from the fog itself. Every century, the island remembers. One must stay. Maya screamed as a light erupted from the altar. Renner reached for her, but she was gone, pulled into the stone, as if the air had swallowed her whole. The light faded. Silence returned. Emilio fell to her knees, gasping. The forest was empty again. No ghosts, no sound, just the altar, glowing faintly beneath her name. She stumbled back to the shore with Renner. The fog thinning just enough to reveal the water. The ship was gone. Only the endless sea remained. Renner collapsed, whispering prayers. Amelia stared at the horizon, her heart hollow. The whispers had stopped, but something told her the island wasn't finished. She turned toward the trees. For a brief moment, she saw a figure standing among them, a woman holding a camera, her expression calm and sorrowful. Eleanor. Then the fog swallowed her too. When Amelia looked down, she was holding a camera identical to Eleanor's, the same model, the same scratches. Inside, a new roll of undeveloped film. She clutched it tightly, tears stinging her eyes. She understood now. The island didn't just take people, it remembered them, it remade them, and soon, it would remember her. 50 years later, the legend of Blackthorn Isle had turned into one of those strange, unsolved mysteries that filled internet forums, late-night documentaries, and eerie podcasts. Every so often, a fisherman off the coast of Scotland claimed to see lights dancing on the water, faint, pulsing lights that vanished when approached. Locals spoke of a moving island, one that appeared and disappeared with the fog, always in a different place, always leaving silence behind. In 2073, a research drone from a Norwegian exploration company was mapping the North Atlantic for undersea cables when it caught something strange, a landmass not listed on any database. The coordinates matched none of the world's known islands. The drone's camera captured 5 minutes of footage before the signal went dark. Those 5 minutes would change everything. Dr. Lena Rowe, a marine geologist at the University of Oslo, was the first to review the recovered data. What she saw wasn't just an island, it was a fragment of Earth, moving through the fog as if it were alive, surrounded by a shimmering electromagnetic field that distorted light and radar. But what froze her blood was the final frame of the footage, the image of a woman standing on the shore, looking directly at the drone, holding an antique camera. Her face was pale, her clothes old-fashioned. The file name embedded in the camera's data was A. Trent. The name echoed through Lena's mind. She remembered reading about Amelia Trent, the young archaeologist who disappeared during a private expedition decades earlier. The story had been dismissed as a hoax, a maritime tragedy blown out of proportion. But here she was, alive, or something close to it, staring back from the fog. Lena assembled a small team of scientists and historians, determined to uncover the truth. The crew set sail aboard the Valhalla, equipped with state-of-the-art navigation and communication systems, all carefully monitored from satellite uplink. This time, there would be no disappearances. This time, the world would see what was on that island. The fog began on the second night. It rolled in quietly, like a tide of white smoke swallowing the horizon. The crew laughed nervously, joking that they'd reached the ghost zone. By morning, all jokes had stopped. Every electronic device began to malfunction. The GPS looped endlessly, the radar pinged in every direction at once, and the compass spun like a child's toy. Then the island appeared silent, still, and impossibly close. It didn't rise from the sea. It simply was there, as though it had always been. Lena and her crew anchored offshore. A soft, rhythmic vibration hummed through the metal hull, the same pulse Amelia once felt decades earlier. They launched a small landing craft, and as it touched the beach, every member of the team felt a faint pressure behind their eyes, as if something was aware of them. The sand was black and cold, smooth as glass. Trees rose inland, twisted in impossible shapes. The air smelled faintly of burnt salt and metal. One of the researchers, a young technician named Joel, tried to take readings with a handheld scanner. It sparked violently and went dead. The energy field's too dense. He said, "It's like the ground itself is alive." Lena felt drawn forward, as if pulled by invisible threads. The deeper they went, the more familiar everything became. The same stone pillars, the same spirals carved into the earth, the same sense of being watched. She knew, though she couldn't explain how, that they were walking through the same paths Amelia Trent once took. Near the heart of the island, they found the altar. Time had not touched it. The carvings were sharper now, cleaner, like they had been rewritten. At the top, just beneath the lichen, was a new name carved into the stone, Lena Rowe. The others stepped back, muttering prayers. Joel whispered, "How could that be there? We only arrived today." Lena reached out, trembling, and touched her name. The stone was warm beneath her fingers. The heartbeat beneath the ground quickened. The air thickened. Then, from the edge of the forest, a figure stepped forward, the same pale woman from the drone footage. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Her voice was soft, layered, echoing. "You came." Lena took a step back. "Amelia Trent." The figure tilted her head. Once her expression didn't change. "Now I am part of it. We all are." The ground began to vibrate, the sound rising to a deep hum. The air shimmered, and one by one, faint silhouettes appeared around Amelia. Men in old uniforms, women with cameras, sailors with hollow eyes. Dr. Alistair Crow, Eleanor Price, Captain Hughes, Maya Renner, they all stood in a ring, their faces pale and empty, their bodies flickering like candlelight in the wind. Amelia raised her hand and pointed toward the sea. It moves, she said. It never stops. It seeks the next to remember. Lena's voice shook. What is it? Amelia's gaze was distant, her tone almost mournful. A door, it was never meant to open. But centuries ago, someone carved its name. That name is what keeps it alive. The fog began to twist and churn, shapes forming within it, hands, faces, mouths whispering. The sound grew louder, like thousands of voices speaking at once. The crew screamed as the mist swallowed them. One by one, their outlines dissolving into air. Lena tried to run, but the ground beneath her feet turned liquid, pulling her down. The last thing she saw was Amelia reaching toward her, her expression filled with sorrow. Now it will remember you, too. When the fog cleared the next morning, the Valhalla was found drifting empty, its engines dead. The logs showed no distress call, no sign of panic. Only a single image saved to the ship's main computer, a photograph of a woman standing on a black beach, holding an old camera. Her face was not Amelia's, it was Lena's. Weeks later, satellites once again detected an anomaly, the same moving landmass, now hundreds of miles south of where it had last been seen. Slowly, the island was migrating, as if searching for something new. And then, one night, deep in an archive facility in Oslo, a security guard swore he heard something strange. A whisper coming from a sealed box marked recovered expedition footage. 2023. When he played the tape, there was only static. And beneath it, faintly, a woman's voice, I told you not to follow. Then silence. Blackthorn Isle waits, adrift in the fog, patient as time itself, watching, listening, remembering every name that dares to call it real.